Hello, everybody, and today is Thursday. It's December 2nd, and I just had a pretty interesting experience. So, I'd like to talk about people and technology. I just tried to teach my girlfriend's father how to use a computer. Sometimes I used to think that maybe like people who couldn't understand the idea of computers, it's like maybe they couldn't understand abstract systems or they were just, no offense to certain people, but they might be dumb. I kind of had a revelation today where I think it might be more about the cultural upbringing. Some people might think, "Oh man, using a computer, blah blah blah, so easy," or "Oh man, it's quite intricate. There's a lot of things to it." Well, I think when I say this, you might be a little surprised. He has trouble navigating Windows. He has trouble copying to a USB drive. That's what I kind of tried to teach him how to do today. He's not very computer literate, but I was hoping that once I explained it, he would understand it better. It's actually kind of weird how some people don't really get it, And it's just one of those things. Computer file systems are a little abstract. 50 years ago, there were like no computers. Like nobody had one. Nobody had one really like, in their home. They couldn't do stuff with it. And I guess there's this huge gap between the previous generation and today, generations that are around now. I was actually having this discussion with a couple friends of mine. You just didn't have the same kind of thinking process and thought process. We've kind of moved away from having brains to store knowledge and facts to being more like processors. Like we're trying to think for ourselves and interpret something or predict something or something like that, where the emphasis is a lot less on memorization and having knowledge, and it's more about using that information now because we have the internet to actually just get whatever information we need. Finally, this is actually a very interesting shift to think about, right? How did I learn about computers? Now, for those of you who don't know, I actually have a degree in computer science, so I know my way around computers a little bit, at least software-wise. I don't really know that much about hardware, but anyway. If you really think about how you learned about technology, I mean, when you get a new program or get a new device, I mean, how do you figure out how it works, right? Most people, we just kind of fiddle around with the buttons and like press things and see what works, and that's pretty much how it goes. But if you really think about what it might have been like 50 years ago, that wasn't the case because if you got a new technological device, it had maybe like, you know, 5 buttons, and all those 5 buttons did everything that it could do. And now it's a lot more complicated because you might have 5 buttons on this little panel over here and like 50 bajillion other buttons all around. So what the hell do they do, right? Most people around now are tech savvy or computer literate. They have learned the ways of learning how a computer works. And I actually feel the way to do that is just explore on your own. Click menus, click buttons, press keys, and just experiment and then see what it does. But that kind of thinking comes about because you have a system to explore in, i.e. the sandbox of a computer. For those of you unfamiliar with the concept of a sandbox, it's basically you can kind of do stuff within the constraints of the system. All right, so anyway, you learn things through the concept of a sandbox. So, you can fiddle with stuff and see what kinds of things you can do to it to make it do stuff for you. There was like nothing like that 50 years ago. This was an exciting revelation in my mind, where I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Maybe it's not really their intelligence or it's just the way that they think. It was just the way that they were brought up. And came up in a time with no sandbox to fiddle around in. Like, how would you know how to run a city way back when? You wouldn't. You would just have to actually build the city and hope for the best. And, maybe you make guesses as to what affects what. Nowadays, you can just build simulators. But with things like, SimCity, it was basically like a simulator for you to figure out how stuff affects other things. And that's kind of like the sandbox of making a city, SimCity. Anyway, getting back to my point, it was actually really frustrating for my girlfriend's dad learning from me because I would kind of try and practice repetition, so hopefully it'd get into his mind. Like the exercises were open up an Explorer window and what's the navigation bar? How do you copy something? How do you paste? how do you know if you're on your current computer or the USB drive? The questions were like that. He kind of struggled with that. I'm not sure if it's maybe just his lack of knowledge or lack of remembering, and I gave him some tips, so hopefully he'll learn for next time. He can increase his computer literacy. Computers aren't going anywhere. Anyway, thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed, please hit the subscribe button. All right, have a good night. Whereas like, whoa, using a computer, blah blah blah, so easy. I know that the processor goes where the processor looks like it goes. Nowadays, you can just build simulators.